Ishi Hakase.
It's a mad world, but it's our world, so we might as well enjoy it as we lampoon the news. I'm your man,
Ishi Hakase.
and we're here to bring you the funny, the weird, the strange, the unbelievable, the stupid, the refreshing, and maybe the provocative. So grab your drink and your snack, and let's get to it. So a few days ago, I was recalling my last week of high school or secondary school, and what came to be known as Senior Cut Day, or truancy. So all the graduating seniors were going to get together, check in, and then leave school for the entire day. And many of us did. What we didn't predict, though, is after we left school, we didn't have anything to do. All we had done at that point is just go to school. So what started off as a good idea, it turned into a big question of, so what do we do now? So about 20 of us jumped on the bus and went downtown. We walked around a bit. Then we decided, hey, let's catch a movie. So we didn't know what to see. We're walking around, looking at these two theaters across the street from one another. And we all decided that we were going to go see this film, and it was solely based on the start time. So basically, this movie jumps off in 15 minutes, so let's go see that. So now it's about a dozen of us in the theater. We're eating popcorn, we're talking, we're joking, and we're really not giving the film much attention. And then about 30 minutes in, none of us were talking. We all sat there transfixed, anxious, some of us scared, some of us near terrified, trying to work through our bravado, looking around at one another, trying to act like nothing was wrong. But the reality is, we were quite frightened. And I know some of you have already predicted what film I'm talking about. No, it's not Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street. This film has produced one of the most enduring pop culture references of all time while solidifying the artistic legacies of two people and launching an actor into superstardom.
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Here's Johnny.
Yeah, that's right, The Shining. And in my opinion, this is the best psychological horror film ever made. Produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick, co-written by novelist Diane Johnson. The film is based on Stephen King's 1977 novel of the same title and stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Scatman Crothers. Copyright owned by Warner Brothers. Now, this film's been around for a long time, and let me tell you, it still holds up. So if you haven't seen it yet, put that on your list of things to do very quickly. So, the film's central character is Jack Torrance. And Jack and his family are winter caretakers of a hotel way up in the mountains, and they become completely isolated and cut off from civilization and society. But Jack, he's optimistic because he can finally write his great American novel, in peace. But as the film unfolds, Jack starts to succumb to the psychological pressures of isolation. Is it him, or are there some supernatural forces at work? Jack eventually reaches his tipping point, and he snaps. And that's what you saw in the last scene. Now, COVID-19 has affected all of us in some way. And because of isolation, many of us are getting very, very close to this tipping point. Some of us have actually snapped. And I just saw a guy yesterday at the Apple store, and he was carrying on about why the queue was so long and how ridiculous this was, that he wasn't able to go immediately into the store and purchase an overpriced hand phone or laptop, a quality product from one of the world's best brands. And I just thought, man, you just need to calm down. So I am here to offer all of you words of encouragement. Yes, I know we're back into phase 2, but we have to keep it together. Being placed in quarantine is not a punishment, it's a precaution. You have to think about the public good. You're not in prison. Occupy your mind. Exercise. Get a new hobby. But don't go over the wall. I don't want anybody out there going Jack Torrance on somebody trying to flee quarantine, because every one of these stories ends bad. Let's begin. A 39-year-old man allegedly used a rope made from bed sheets to shimmy down from a 4th-floor hotel room and flee Australian quarantine, police said. While there have been many instances of people flouting COVID protocols amid the pandemic, this Australian man's attempt will probably count as one of the most daring ones. The 39-year-old escaped a hotel quarantine by crafting a rope out of bed sheets and scaling down the building through a window. He arrived in Perth from Brisbane on Monday, but was told to leave the state within 48 hours, failing to get a mandatory pass before travel. He requested to get one upon arrival, but was refused as he did not meet any of the exemptions for entry. He was directed to quarantine temporarily overnight in a local hotel. However, instead of following orders, he climbed out of his 4th floor room at Rivervale Hotel, knotting several bed sheets together before fleeing the area. The Western Australia Police Force shared 3 images on Facebook showing his escape strategy, informed that he was arrested later for breaking the law. As you go out and see these pictures on the internet, and there's several of them, my first question is, how many bed sheets are actually in this room? And I've checked into many hotels, and you have a fitted sheet and a sheet, and that's really about it. When I look at these pictures, it looks like there's about 4 or 5, maybe 6 bed sheets tied together. I find that a little curious. But also, when they describe this as a daring escape, I think they might even be understating that a bit. You know, doctors use a formula called lethal doses to determine the likelihood of death in a fall. And at 4 stories, the odds are 50-50. And he must have had something really important to get to if he was able to put his life up at those kinds of odds. A COVID-positive man disguised himself as his wife in order to fly. An Indonesian man who tested positive for COVID-19 was caught midair after disguising himself as his wife so he could board a flight. The man, who has been publicly identified only by his initials as DW, boarded a Citylink domestic flight from Jakarta to Ternate while wearing a niqab that covered him from head to toe, reported a CNN affiliate in Indonesia. The flight attendant reportedly told authorities that she saw DW go into an airplane bathroom, then come out wearing men's clothes instead of the niqab, a full-face veil with an opening for the eyes. She notified airport authorities in Ternate, who detained the passenger upon disembarking from the plane. An on-site health officer immediately tested the man for COVID-19, and the PCR test came back positive, according to officials. After that, the airport immediately contacted the Ternate City COVID-19 Handling Task Force team to evacuate the man while wearing personal protective equipment, and then taking him in an ambulance to his house to self-isolate, where he will be supervised by task force officials. Ternate COVID-19 Task Force operational head Muhammad told reporters, once his self-isolation period is complete, local police have stated that they intend to prosecute. Very good, congratulations. There are a lot of stories like this emerging from Australia and New Zealand, and I'm not quite sure why this has become a problem.
Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great.
I'll do my best. A man has been arrested after he cut through a fence tie through 1.8 meters of fencing to break out of a managed isolation facility in Hamilton. Police said it was believed the individual left the Distinction Hotel for about half an hour between 6:30 and 7 yesterday and went to a liquor store. He is now in police custody and will later appear in court. Calling entrepreneurs. There is an opportunity here. There's a very clear pain point. People at the Distinction Hotel need booze. Set up a delivery service. A woman escaped from an Auckland-managed isolation facility through a fire escape and wandered around the city for about 2 hours, but nobody knew about it until she tried to escape again the next night. On Friday morning at 1 a.m., on-site security guards at the Grand Millennium Hotel stopped the woman trying to escape through a fire exit. Police spoke to the woman, who revealed that she had escaped the night before. She had left the hotel in Auckland about 1 o'clock in the morning and returned about 3 o'clock in the morning, the statement said. I've been to Auckland. I'm not sure what you can actually do in Auckland between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning, but I hope it was worth it. More from Auckland. On Tuesday night, a man escaped a hotel in Auckland and shopped at a busy central supermarket. He was later found to be COVID-19 positive. And on Saturday, a woman at the Pullman Hotel got out by climbing over a fence and absconded for about 2 hours before being found nearby. Following the breaches, the government yesterday announced that there will be a permanent police presence at every managed isolation and quarantine facility in New Zealand. Authorities said with all the extra measures being put in place, people were still popping out for a beer. New Zealanders have been through far too much for such a disorganized approach. A woman is facing criminal charges after going Jack Torrance by kicking down a door to break a hotel quarantine in far north Queensland. Police Deputy Commissioner Steve Golszewski says the 22-year-old woman, who was missing for 24 hours before staff noticed, is the first person to escape hotel quarantine in Cairns. Now, this is already funny. They're keeping statistics on people that are escaping, and she wasn't noticed missing for 24 hours, but then how did they sort of backtrack and know it was 24 hours? I don't know. We'll continue on. He says that Cairns residents started quarantine at the Cairns Pacific International Hotel on Thursday, but she was found to be missing on Monday afternoon. CCTV footage shows the Aussie scaled 2 balconies and used an outdoor staircase before breaking down a door to the outside. She has kicked it in, so fairly motivated, one of the officials told reporters. The deputy commissioner said the woman was later found at her mother's home in the suburbs of Cairns on Monday afternoon. The woman was cooperative when arrested and is currently being held in the Cairns Watch House. So, it must have been pretty important that now you are going to be held, probably fined, and potentially made your mother ill. 2 Chinese nationals have reportedly escaped from a hotel in Phnom Penh during their quarantine. Ministry of Health spokesman Or Van Dyne said the 2 men were placed in a center upon their arrival at the Phnom Penh International Airport on September 8th. However, she said that they fled the hotel quarantine center on Wednesday after awaiting their COVID-19 test results. The men were identified as JJ, 23 years old, and ZJ, 32 years old, who both arrived in Cambodia at 11 a.m. before being quarantined at his designated hotel. Van Dien said the authorities are still looking for the duo, noting that although they tested negative for the virus, they are still required to undergo mandatory quarantine. So they tested negative, but they bounced out of this hotel as quick and as fast as they could. This sounds like they might have been up to something else. Allegedly. The first case involved a 36-year-old Cambodian American woman who arrived in Cambodia on July 15th. After testing negative, she was placed in mandatory quarantine in a hotel in Phnom Penh. However, she escaped from her room at midnight on July 18th. Later that evening, the authorities found her in a guest house in Kampong Cham City as she was sent to complete her quarantine back at the Mekong Hotel. I'm trying to follow this story, and it seems to me that she left a hotel to go to an Airbnb. So she was quarantined in a hotel, she escaped, and went to a guest house. More curious behavior. Well, it's not all happening in Australia and New Zealand. Let's jump over to the southern part of the United States. Metro Nashville police have charged a man who was under quarantine who was under quarantine and escaped from a homeless shelter. So according to the arrest affidavit, Randall Kirkley was quarantined on Thursday after testing positive. He was informed by the Metro Nashville Health Department that he would not be able to leave the premises until cleared, but Kirkley jumped a fence at the facility and left, prompting police to stop him and arrest him nearly 2 miles away. So where does a homeless man have to get to? And I would assume that maybe he would welcome a clean bed and a little bit of shelter, but who am I to get in the mind of Randall Kirkley? Authorities in Zimbabwe have started publicly naming people who have escaped from quarantine centers and urging the public to report them to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Zimbabwe has seen a rise in confirmed cases of COVID-19 in recent days, with most recorded at quarantine centers. More than 3,700 people are being kept in the quarantine centers after entering the country, mostly from neighboring South Africa and Botswana, but dozens are fleeing the confinement, complaining of filthy, unhygienic conditions and charging infections are spread at the quarantine areas. An obvious problem. So first, Zimbabwe officials are trying to shame people into remaining into quarantine. But then, on the other hand, aren't quarantine facilities supposed to be paragons of hygienic conditions? So, it gets very difficult. I haven't seen the details, but it's certainly justifiable if somebody wants to bounce out of a quarantine facility where many of the infections are actually happening at the quarantine facility. A Briton has pleaded guilty to breaking Singapore's quarantine rules by leaving his hotel room to visit his fiancée. Nigel S., 52, walked up an emergency staircase to spend the night with Agatha E., 39, in September. The couple are now married. Agatha E. admitted aiding him. Breaking the rules could bring 6 months in jail. Singapore requires people to spend 14 days in a hotel upon arrival. In a district court on Monday, Nigel S. pleaded guilty to one charge of contravening a control order and one of failing to wear a mask. Agatha E. admitted a single charge of conspiring to contravene a control order. Court documents said Nigel had left his room 3 times. Agatha E. had booked a room in the Ritz-Carlton Millenia Singapore Hotel where he was quarantined. Nigel S. faces 6 years in jail. So I can't wait to see these honeymoon pictures on Instagram. It's like, oh yeah, remember how you used to come visit me at the Changi prison complex? Oh, I know, there was such wonderful, fond memories. I tried to bring that violin and that cake. I mean, I have heard about people being in love, but he was quarantined and she went and checked into the same hotel so they could have a get-together. They couldn't wait 14 days. Quarantine is not prison. It's only 2 to 3 weeks. If you really really had to get out, have some perspective. Prison is much, much worse. So don't tell people that you're in prison. But if you were so inclined to try to escape prison, I guess people would, maybe think about different ways to escape. But you have to remember, this is not as simple as what's portrayed in the movies like Shawshank or Escape from Alcatraz. These are just movies, and escaping from prison is no easy feat. The truth is, some of these things are absolutely outlandish, but they're choreographed by Hollywood. And remember, everybody, truth is stranger than fiction, and certainly more entertaining. So here are a few actual attempted daring escapes. That damn social media. Chris Crago had a warrant out for his arrest because of a barroom brawl. Rather than staying in hiding, Crago thought it would be a great idea to post his location on Facebook. It wasn't. He was arrested. Bruh, you only had 1 more day to wait. We understand that people can get impatient, but come on. Andrew Wilson had only 24 hours remaining on his sentence, and he would have been a free man. Nope. Wilson escaped using a work truck camp. He was eventually captured, and needless to say, he was no longer eligible for early release. The Snoopy incident. 2 men from New Zealand. What's going on in New Zealand? So two men in New Zealand tried to break through two men in New Zealand tried to break their friend out of jail with one wearing a Snoopy costume. As it turns out, not only was this a horrible idea, they actually went to the wrong prison to break out their friend. A little excess baggage. Maria Rivero tried to free her contortionist boyfriend from jail by packing him in a suitcase that she had brought in with her. She expected that she could do this without anyone noticing, but everyone noticed. I mean, you cannot pick up a grown man packed into a suitcase without some struggle. My very best to you. Sorry, no room. A few prisoners tried to escape from a Brazilian jail by knocking a hole in a shower. Two of those prisoners managed to get through, but when the last one tried to go through, he got stuck. He cried out for help, and when the guards arrived, they just decided to take pictures first. And you have to go out and see these pictures. They are absolutely hilarious. You'll find it on Google. Don't mind us. We're just bags of trash. So two inmates in Brazil tried to escape prison by climbing into full bags of trash. They got caught because they began squirming around, and an investigator thought a rat had gotten to the bag. So after beating the bag several times, attempting to put an end to the rat, the two men were apprehended and put on garbage duty. All right, actually, that last part, I just made that up. But that would be pretty funny. That would be a very good joke. And speaking of jokes, you want to hear Knock Knock 1? Of course. Knock Knock. Who's there? Escaped convict looking and knocking on a prisoner's guard's door. That is actually not a joke. That did happen. James Russell had escaped from the Olympic Correctional Center. During his run, he spotted a log cabin. The person who answered the door was a security guard from the prison from which Russell had just escaped. He was quickly rearrested. Hopping to get out. A prisoner by the name of George Billy Hunt. Billy is not a nickname for George, right? It's William. It's William, right? Okay, anyway, what do we know? Billy tried to escape prison after dressing up as a skinned kangaroo. Now, I can't imagine what skinned kangaroo looks like. Probably like those bodies that were hanging upside down in Predator 2. He was captured after some guards mistook him for a real kangaroo, which they were planning to kill and eat. Australians have been ingrained ingrained reluctance to eating their national emblem, but a number of chefs are now championing kangaroo meat as a delicious and environmentally friendly alternative to beef and pork. Once again, if I am going to have kangaroo, I would prefer it wrapped up in a package from Acme, Kroger, or cold storage, but I don't think I'm going to go out and skin my own kangaroo. Slammed by stupidity. Two inmates from New Zealand tried to escape from a courthouse while chained to each other. They probably argued over which way to run and got tripped up on a pole and probably stumbled. But in any event, as they tried to flee, officers quickly arrested them. Again. And when I read this, it just reminded me of that Rosie Greer movie, The Thing with Two Heads. Rosie Greer was a very accomplished American football player who transitioned into acting, like acting in air quotes. And so the plot of the film is that doctors are forced to transplant the head of a dying white racist surgeon onto the body of an incarcerated black man on death row. If you haven't seen this movie, it came out in the 70s. It is the worst science fiction film, while at the same time being one of the funniest comedy films I've ever experienced. So you have to check it out. The still images alone will definitely crack you up. And I often wonder, like, who pitched this movie? Like, who goes in and says, hey, we're going to have this white racist attached to the body of a black convict, and then we're going to see what happens. And then somebody goes, that's a great idea. I will produce that movie for you. Once again, what do we know? This is our last nugget, and here's the headline. Guard noticed one small detail. At Hamilton County Jail in Noblesville, Indiana, an inmate tried to escape by posing as another inmate who was soon to be released. It might have worked except for one thing. The guy due for release was black, and the attempted escapee was white. I cannot make these things up. I thank you, list25.com, for some of these pearls. Once again, list25.com for some of these pearls. Now, yes, we're having fun, but we have to think for a moment to take these things seriously in terms of anyone who's struggling with mental health, whether that be through isolation or phobias or depression or anxiety, an eating disorder, an addiction, social isolation, anything. You matter. And if you're feeling stressed, if you think you're going to go Jack Torrance, talk to somebody, get some help. We don't want you to miss on all the positives that we have in the world. So that's it for me. That's my time. I'll check in with you in a couple of days. Subscribe. You know how the platform works. If you have news, whether it's weird, funny, shocking, goofy, or generally unbelievable, send it along. Send me a message. Put it in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this news or not news. The world's a very interesting place. There's a lot of curiosities out there. Keep your heads up. Spread the word. Stay safe. And much love. And in the words of Russell Westbrook, and I'm out. And then y'all tripping.